share that with you before we have our conversation with Diane. Some of you remember when Bill Clinton was president, his education agenda was Goals 2000. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Goals 2000 was based on what was called at the time outcome-based education, OBE. We call them out-of-body experience. Because they were very fluffy, woohoo, is what we want our kids to think about wanting to do, maybe. So as a response to that, I think is where we got the idea. Now we need to be very explicit, very determined and intentional about what it is that we expect our children to know and be able to do, and at what level we expect them to know and be able to do it. And from that came the standards-based education. In the early to mid-90s, I was principal at Kiva School in Scottsdale. It's a public unified school, the best school in the state, I might say. And I was principal there, and then Lisa Grant Keegan became school superintendent of public instruction, which is the job that Diane is asking for your vote for. And she asked me to come be associate superintendent. And so I was appointed to that position. And in that position, my job was to promote and expand and oversee charter schools, and also to do the Arizona academic standards, kindergarten through 12th grade, because at that time they were non-existent. At the state level, and Title 15, which is the law that governs public education, says that it is the state's responsibility, not Washington's, to determine what our kids should know and be able to do. So we went about that process. And we developed K-12 standards in absolutely every academic area. And it took us quite a bit of time and quite a bit of money. And I will tell you, they were excellent. When we were done, those Arizona academic standards were rated nationwide. They were used by many states as a model to look at, to compare against. They were A+, B+, in every academic area. They were truly outstanding standards. How did we do that? We did that with the Arizona teachers. Arizona principals, teachers, school board members, parents, all types of organizations got involved in developing those Arizona academic standards. From that point, then, we developed the Arizona's instrument to measure standards known as AIMS. I have lots of scars on my back. My son used to say, "Mom, please don't tell my friends what you do." Okay, order. But then when George Bush was elected president, I went to DC and worked on education reform, school choice issues with President Bush, the Congress, and the department. I'm telling you, from being there 3 years, you need to keep these issues here in Arizona. You don't, I believe, honestly, I wrote this on my Facebook yesterday, you need to turn off the lights at the Department of Ed, turn around, and deadbolt the door. The Department of Ed is a real issue for us in Arizona. So I'm absolutely baffled that Arizona has adopted the Common Core standards. You know, I was gone for 8 years into Montana, came back, and I'm just overwhelmed to see the position that we're in today in our public education. So I did some research. I said, how in the heck did we get where we are? When did Arizona get involved in the Common Core standards? Well, here's what it tells me. Arizona leadership went to Washington, D.C. in 2009 and 2010, and they applied for the Race to the Top, federal funding and federal grants. Who were the members of the Arizona leadership? Oh, Governor Brewer participated in this. Tom Horn was the superintendent of public instruction who brought in the Common Core to Arizona. He's now our Attorney General. The other person, Mesa Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Michael Cohen, and Senator Rich Crandall were the Arizona leadership. They went to D.C., they signed on, they got a $25 million grant to implement Common Core. However, here's the catch-22. Do you think $25 billion is going to implement Common Core? No way. You know what the dollar amount now is that's going to be implemented? $387 million. So, I mean, it's one of those things where we take money thinking it's going to help us, and then we get bit as we go out the door. Or bitten. So, please welcome Diane Douglas. She and I are going to have a conversation. Diane and I are going to have a conversation not only about Common Core. We're going to tackle several issues, but let's start with that elephant in the room, Diane. Can we do that? All right.
Sure.
For people that maybe don't know what went on, like I said, how did we get where we are that we're in this mess?
Well, you summed it up very well, Billie. Basically, the progressives who are controlling education created a crisis and then appointed, or rather anointed themselves to solve the crisis. It was adopted back in 2010 by our unelected Board of Education, and you touched on the amount of money we received, $25 million, and let me give you a little perspective on that, if I may. $25 million, half of it stayed with our State Department of Education in order to help implement Common Core and retrain our teachers who were already highly qualified in their content area and certified that. So I'm not sure I understand what has changed about math and English language in the last 4 years that people who are experts have to be retrained. But nonetheless, so they kept half of that money. Half of it went out to the school districts who had helped apply for the Race to the Top grant. We have, so it's $12.5 million, even without Common Core math, I remember that. We have over 1 million K-12 children here in Arizona, so basically what our school districts got was less than $12.50 per child, one-time money, and then it was doled out to the districts over 3 years. So we sold out our children for less than $4. I mean, that's unconscionable, but basically they went behind closed doors, they wrote these standards, and I agree with you, experts, standards experts, far better than I, have said Arizona standards were among the best in the nation, and they always improved over 20 years. We kept working on them.
Yeah. You know, I am so surprised when I see the people that are behind Common Core, and by that, I mean they're promoting it. The Chambers of Commerce. Overwhelmed by that sometimes when I think about it. And then we even have our own county superintendent, Tim Carter, is for Common Core. And you know, and I don't think, I think there's always two sides to an issue, so I always respect other people's opinions, but I'm just so surprised that we would spend millions of dollars developing the Arizona academic standards and then put them on the shelf because of a little bit of federal money. Is it the money, Diane?
It's not the federal money that's coming to Arizona necessarily that got us to adopt Common Core. That's a piece of it. The money that's the driving force behind Common Core, you have to understand, is the billions and billions and billions of dollars we spend as a nation to educate our children. So it's not that we got a little bit of money here in Arizona. You talk about the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce, the National Chamber of Commerce, was given, if I remember the number correctly, about $2.6 billion by, I think I have that right, by Bill Gates. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are the driving force behind Common Core, and they're just giving out bucket loads of money. They are sponsoring what we would call non-government organizations, NGOs, and nonprofits to implement Common Core standards. It's going to be high in technology, which is going to mean a lot of money for the Gates Foundation, for Microsoft, for Intel, for companies like this, and that's part of the driving factor. That's the money that's driving Common Core.
So it kind of goes back to what John Lamerson was talking about, crony capitalism in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
Exactly.
You know, the other group that's there is the Governors Association.
Yes.
National Governors Association. However, I understand that, is it Fallon, the governor that's pulled out, has pulled her state, Oklahoma, yes. There's several states are pulling out. So what do you think that Arizona should do regarding Common Core? Because I know we have a lot of money that's invested in that right now. So what would be, if you were elected superintendent of public instruction, what's going to be your strategy with regard to Common Core?
Strategy of how to remove it, or what we should
or
do?
What you want to do?
We must remove Common Core standards from the state of Arizona. They are federally controlled, they are federally mandated, and we don't own them. And the analogy I would give you, ladies and gentlemen, think about your home. Your home, would you prefer to own 100% of it, or 15% of it? Obviously, even under Common Core math, 100% makes more sense. Well, with the Common Core standards, they were written behind closed doors. They were written in Washington, D.C. The National Governors Association is not a legislative branch. They're a trade organization, a lobbyist group, once again, heavily funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But with the Common Core standards, they're copyrighted. That copyright is owned by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. The states can only add 15%, and I've not seen anything that explains how you calculate what 15% of a standard is, or what we can add to it for our own. But there, 85% of our standards must be Common Core. It's only the 85% piece that will be tested, which will ensure that we're doing what the federal government has told us to do. Why would we only want to have rights to 15% of our children's education? Common Core is unconstitutional. Nowhere in the Constitution have we delegated the authority to educate our children to the federal government. So the federal government can only do, according to the 10th Amendment, the federal government can only do what we allow it to do. We have not given it the education of our children. And even if you wanted to play devil's advocate and say these standards are wonderful, which they're not, they're only wonderful because they say so, not because they've been tested anywhere and proven to be good. But even if they say that let's pretend they were good. If the federal government wants to change them, they can change them like that, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's why we must get control of our children's education back here in Arizona.
Thank you. You know, the other thing about Common Core, of course, we spend a lot of money on it, but I think it's going to be really hard. I've talked to some teachers, and I'm sure we have teachers in the audience, that are concerned that they're not getting the training that they need or the professional development. I mean, they're going, we keep changing the darn target. We keep changing the target that they are very baffled as I am about this. So.
How the teachers are going to be impacted, and let me first, changing the target is ridiculous. Yes. Because math has not changed. The English language has not changed. We're teaching our children what I call cockamamie tricks and schemes to do simple arithmetic. And I'll give you an example. It's hard to do it without a board. But I saw a math problem. 32 minus 12 equals 20, right? We do it in our heads. If one of our children or grandchildren does it in their head and puts the answer on a piece of paper, wrong or partial credit. They've taken that simple subtraction problem and turned it into a 5-step addition problem. That's what teachers need to be trained for, and why should they have to be retrained to do things that are absolutely ridiculous and ludicrous for them to be trying to teach our children? The problem that's going to occur for teachers is now their compensation and their evaluations are going to be based on the testing of these children doing things in ridiculous ways that children shouldn't be taught to do them. And that's going to have a huge impact on our teacher. It's a desire to drive the experienced teachers out of the classroom, bring in young teachers who have now had 4 years. They've had to indoctrinate younger teachers into believing this federal scam is appropriate for our children.
Well, recently Governor Brewer's been in the news because she pulled us out of, and I think there's a misunderstanding out there, pulled us out of PARC, which is the testing, but can you tell us why? Because I think people think now we're out of Common Core.
We are absolutely not out of Common Core. What the governor pulled us out of, with the signature also of our current office holder, the incumbent John Huppenthal, is to pull us out of what was called the PARC Consortium, and that was another non-elected body that was created to help develop the PARC test. And there's 2 tests. There could either be the PARC test or the Smarter Balance, and now there's also McGraw-Hill has a division that's working on testing, and testing is nothing new. So what they've done is they've pulled us out of the park consortium because now our State Department of Ed is going out for what is called an RFP, request for a proposal for the testing for the state of Arizona. So they've pulled us out of that consortium so that Park, who is now partnered and contracted with Pearson Publishing, Pearson Testing, the largest testing publishing education company in the world, so they can avoid the appearance of impropriety when our state gives the contract to Pearson and Park. And it's crazy. There was a request for information that was filed back in December with our State Board of Ed. Pearson and Park both responded to it. Well, this impartial board in their RFI submitted 3.5 pages of our taxpayer-paid teachers, administrator, high-level Department of Education employees who have helped them develop the test. Now we're going to contract to buy the test from them that we created. It is such inappropriate contracting, in my opinion.
Is it true that a lot of the employees now at the Department of Ed are federal employees?
That's what I hear.
Okay.
And believe me, I will be looking into that if and when I become superintendent. I hear that over half of them they're not federal employees. What they're happening, my understanding, is they are being paid with federal grants.
Okay.
That means federal money pays them, but they're still Arizona employees. They're in the Arizona retirement system, and they will be our responsibility long after that money is gone.
Interesting. Thank you. One of the other things about the Common Core's, they never talk about Common Core in Arizona because they changed the name, didn't they?
Yes.
What is the name?
It's the Arizona, and I always put this in quotes, Arizona's College and Career Ready Standards, because by putting Arizona in front of it, they're making us believe we've reverted to our original standards. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Common Core standards remain intact. They are exactly the same. As a matter of fact, the press release you spoke about, withdrawing us from the Park Consortium, states right in it, those standards remain intact.
Yeah. Okay.
And outside of our control.
Let's move on a little bit, because I know that the purpose of all that we do is for student achievement. What is it in your mind, Diane, what do we need to do in our schools to improve student achievement? Some people say it's these standards that are going to do it. What do you feel will improve student achievement?
We have to remember, when our nation had the education system that was the envy of the world, which provided more prosperity, spread more peace, saved more lives, put more people in to live in freedom. We didn't have standards, but we knew what to teach our children. We know they need to read. We know they need to be taught to read with phonics reading instruction. Now, phonics is thank you. Phonics is the law of the land in Arizona and has been for 10 years. A bill was passed by sponsored by Representative Karen Johnson, and it said we must teach our children to read with phonics. The only problem is we didn't say only phonics. So what's been happening in our colleges of education is they teach the prospective teachers a smattering of phonics. And then they go on to whole language, because the people that headed our colleges of education and our universities were the two top gurus of whole language. Whole language, for those of you who don't know, is word memorization. So children memorize a list of words, and I know how debilitating this is, because that's how I was taught to read when I was in elementary school many years ago. And it was only when my own daughter went to school and was taught with phonics that my eyes went wide open. I went, holy cow, now the whole thing fits into place. So they're teaching our children to read using improper methods, and now they've hijacked math. They're not teaching our children 1 + 1 = 2. They don't want the children to do the memorization because they call it drill and kill. It's rote, it's boring. The reality is the only way early elementary children can become successful in these things, in reading and in arithmetic, is by going through and using these brains that are little sponges for the rote memorization, and then you build on the foundation. Common Core is taking higher level learning, abstract thinking. Kindergartners, first, second, third graders, they can't possibly do it. They're not developmentally ready to do it. But yet we're trying to force it upon them. I tell people, you know, it sounds very rigorous to ask your newborn to walk, but they can't do it. You can't ask a first grader to do algebra. They don't have the mental capacity to do the abstract concepts. That's what we need to get back to, the basics.
You know, sometimes I think it would just be better off to get the old McGuffey reader and get a quality teacher and put on the classroom. Yeah. Teacher quality, in my opinion, that is the #1 issue. We need to develop quality teachers and bring them into our classroom. How will you, as superintendent, what is it that you can do with your bully pulpit as superintendent to have increased teacher quality?
Well, and that's what I will have, and I hope everybody understands, is basically a bully pulpit. What we need to do, in my opinion, is get back to the day where our teachers are certified in their content area, not certified simply in pedagogy, where they study for 4 years the theory of how to teach. No, they need to be experts in their content area, and they need to be excellent communicators, because that's what it takes to be a good teacher. In Arizona, to be a math teacher, you only need 24 credits of math. That's not a person who loves math. That's not a person who wants to live with math every single day. When my daughter was in school, I searched the high school roster for the math teachers who were mathematicians who became teachers. That's what we need for our children.
And I'm often amazed by how quality people, let's say some, like Tiger Woods, for heaven's sakes, could not go teach golf in our high school. Yeah, it's amazing that people that are so expert in their field cannot go in and teach because they're not certified. What can be done to bring experts into the school and kind of skirt around some of the certification issues?
Well, we have to have the...
We have some already, I know.
We have to have a state board of education that's not stacked with educational insiders, with all due respect to them. We need to have a certification process that certifies people in their content area. And you bring up an excellent example. A bar-certified lawyer cannot teach a high school law class in Arizona. That's ridiculous. A CPA is not qualified to teach accounting. I mean, we have resources, phenomenal resources, people who are experts in their field. We need to get them into the classroom with our children.
Just here in Prescott, we have so many retired professionals that could help our schools.
It would help everybody.
Yeah. So let's go on to school choice. So what's your position? You know, that's one of my big ones, is that I believe in open education and opportunity for parents to choose their school. So where are you with that?
I believe to the depth of my being that God gives children to parents. It is up to parents to be responsible and make the decisions for their children's upbringing, for their moral upbringing, and for their education.
It's hard to go into a group, to a school, and not hear the first thing that comes out of everyone's mouth is we just don't have enough money. There's never enough dollars. Over half of our general fund goes to K-12 education, doesn't it? I think it's over half.
Not to K-12 gets about 42-43%, but then when you add
The
post-secondary, then we go over 50% of our general fund. Can I tell you a little story? When I was on the school board, I served on the Peoria School Board for 8 years, and that's at that time when I went on the board, we were the third largest district in the state. We had 38,000 students, 4,000 employees, and an operating budget of about $200 million. So it was kind of controversial. It was a 4-to-1 board. I was the lone, not Republican, but the lone conservative on the board. And they didn't want to teach me anything. So, and I'm sure you've heard of the National School Board Association. So I started going to some of their conferences to get some training on what should a good school board member be doing. So I went to a conference, and they'd have a dinner like this and then time to mingle, and I'd walk up to someone and I'd say, "Hi, I'm from Arizona," and they'd say, "Hi, I'm from Louisiana, and did you know we're number 49th in the nation in funding?" And I look at them and go, 49th? Yeah, we're 49th in funding. I said, well, how can you be 49th? I'm from Arizona and we're 49th. And then I'd move along, and then I'd run into someone from, it doesn't matter where, Nebraska or Georgia or wherever you'd say, and they'd say, hi, I'm from Georgia, and we're number 49th in the nation in funding. I said, how can you be 49th? I'm from Arizona, we're 49th. And I'm being a little facetious, but what I came to discover was the top 5 brag about being in the top 5, and I'm from New Jersey, and they were always in the top 5 in spending in education. And everybody else claimed to be 49th because they didn't want to admit to being 50th. And were they wrong? Some of the things we found is how they parse the numbers.
Sure.
One of the things that happened here in Arizona is we have one system, or bucket of money, if you will, that we use to fund what they call M&O, everyday expenses, turning on your lights, paying your teachers, paying your benefits, all those kinds of things. But we fund our school renewal and capital very differently. So some would look at a state that has all that funding packaged together, and then they look at us and maybe take just the M&O or just the capital. And so, you know, we can have discussions all day long, and I'm glad to do it about, do we fund it enough, do we not fund it enough, do we pay our teachers enough, should we pay them more, whatever. But my contention when I was on the school board is, let's be honest about where we are, let's be honest about how we do things, and then let's have an open and honest discussion about where we go from here.
So how much money do we spend right now per student in Arizona, average?
About pushing $9,000.
I think most of the private schools, religious schools, I'm thinking of my church is Willow Hills Bend, and Trinity School is there, and I think it's about $5,000 bang up school. Mm-hmm. So I guess my thought is, I always like to describe with school choice, imagine a child with a backpack and you stuff $9,000 in it. And then you let them go to their school. Let them come to my school, public school. And then let's add up all those $9,000. And where the heck does that money go? Because I can tell you, it doesn't go to the classroom. So between the time that that money is given from our legislature and it gets through that top-down system, what is left over for the classroom is peanuts. We just need to turn this upside down. What can you as superintendent do to tell us that more money would get into the classroom?
Well, I'm a huge advocate for local control, and this is why I'm so glad you had your school board members here to speak, because that, in my opinion, is probably, and I admit my bias, is probably one of the most important elected positions we have. And we have to make those choices very wisely. You know, Beth and I, this is Beth Holgren, my chief of staff, and she travels and helps me everywhere, so please give her a hand. We were at an event the other night, and a gentleman was lamenting about the number of school districts we have and how they're not responsive and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not sure why we as Republicans, and hopefully conservative Republicans, think that if our elected officials won't respond to us at the local level, a higher level of government will somehow be better and more responsive to us. You know, that's not going to be the case. It's very important that you get people elected at your local level who make the spending to the classroom their highest priority. When I was on the Peoria School Board, when I first began, our dollars to the classroom were decreasing. We were probably, when I started, we were below 60 cents, if I remember correctly, of the dollar going to the classroom. And our board made it a priority to get more money of that money into the classroom. One of the things we did, and this is not unusual in school districts, is that they have many, many teachers who are assigned outside of the classroom to be teachers of teachers, or instructional specialists, whatever you call them in your districts. We made it a priority to get those people back in the classroom and working with children, which is where they belong to be working. They must be working. So things like that, you can look for ways. We changed some of the things we were doing with employee benefits, saved our taxpayers several millions of dollars on the cost of employee benefits, while still providing the same quality of benefit to our employees. That puts money back in the classroom. Since the Department of Ed was created, in your comments to turning out the lights and barring the door, boy, is that long overdue. We know that while the student enrollment in the United States has not gone up that much, school employment has gone up exponentially, and it's not teachers in the classroom. It's all type of administrative aides and things. That takes money out of the classroom and away from the children. Will I mandate that happen from the state level? No, I don't believe in it. I believe you need to be electing good people to your school boards. One thing I do want to do from when I'm the superintendent is create, I hate to use the term department because I don't want to grow government, but a resource for school boards that they can be trained on their constitutional duty to their community and the people they represent. Right now, school board members go to ASBA, the Arizona School Board Association, to get their training, and I will tell you how they train your school board members. I know because I've sat through 8 years of their meetings. They tell them, you get elected by the community, your job is to hire the superintendent and then do whatever the superintendent wants.
Yep. Rubber stamp. Consent agenda.
That's exactly right. And usually the superintendents, when I first ran for school board, right after I was elected, I was called to the district office to meet administration, and the then board president turned to me and with a big sigh said, Diane, let me tell you how we do things in Peoria. We don't run for election unless someone wants to give up their board seat. And I beat an incumbent. I beat out, I can't remember if he was a 4 or 8 year incumbent, but I beat him by a lot of votes. So I won the seat. And first we wait till the person wants to leave their board seat, and then we look around and decide who will run for election. And I said, well, you know what, silly me. I looked at the law and said, I'm qualified, I'm gonna run. But that's the mentality, unfortunately, thank you, of too many of our school boards. They believe it's a club for them to pick the members of, but I vehemently disagree. They represent you, and they need to be fighting not just for your children, but for your very precious tax dollars too.
Thank you. My final area I'd like to touch upon is charter schools. Obviously, I think they're wonderful. I think they've given us some great models to look at. I think it's just one of those options that should be out there for parents. What is your view about charter schools?
Once again, can't say it enough. God gives children to parents, so it's up to parents to decide what education is best for their children. The problem we're facing today in Arizona is that school choice has effectively been eliminated because charter schools are publicly funded schools, and charter schools must follow the Common Core standards. And it's mandated. Their boards have to sign a declaration of alignment with the standards. The charter school boards have to sign them, the school board has to sign them, the school superintendent has to sign them, and every single principal must sign this alignment. When I was on the school board, now they said they had it for 15 years. After I left the board, I first heard about it, and I said, well, what is this? We didn't do this when I was on the board. They said, oh yeah, we did. We just didn't bother you with it. We just kind of signed it and sent it in for you. But once they have to be aligned, and I used to tell the charter schools, you know what, you're not in any problems because, you know what, there's no Common Core police to come and make sure if you go over and above the Common Core or you keep using your same standards. Well, our president has now created what is called the principal ambassadorship. And honest to goodness, I thought it was a joke when I first heard about it, but I went to the U.S. Department of Education website. He's creating a program to have a federal government employee in every single school to make sure we follow the rules. So, will it come to fruition? Who knows? Where will the money? But they are currently taking applications for these ambassadorships. So we need to be very, very worried, ladies and gentlemen. Our children's future in a free nation is literally at stake.
And the issue is that this is unconstitutional.
And illegal by 3 acts of
Absolutely.
Congress.
This is a state, this is not a federal issue. This is a state issue. Well, we appreciate, I just want to say before I turn the last 5 minutes over to Diane, that the current incumbent, John Hubenthal, was invited to come. We actually were led to believe that he would be here. And then about a month ago, he said he did not want to come. So I don't want you to think that we're here taking sides, because we're not. We do not endorse anyone. We would never do that. But he was invited. He did decide not to come. So I just wanted to be clear about that. Before I turn this over to Diane, let me tell you, she's already mentioned that she was on the Peoria Unified School District. She served as their board president for 2008 and 2009, and that she is a graduate of a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Marketing from Rutgers University. So can you please, once more, welcome Diane, and let's give her a last final 5 minutes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here today. You kind of heard a little bit about my background. My family, which is my husband and our daughter, moved here from what I fondly refer to as the People's Republic of New Jersey back in 1990, and we moved here to raise and educate our daughter here. We knew that here I could be a stay-at-home mom, and she could be raised with our values, our morals, our principles. As she went through school, I began studying our education system, and I've been a student of it for over 20 years, or about 20 years actually. I didn't do it at a college or university because I didn't want to learn what they wanted to tell me about education. I wanted to follow the path wherever it took me, and I did it in part so I could ensure that my daughter got the type of education that she could be a self-sustaining adult. One of the ways I tell people I know that we are successful is that my daughter's now 26 years old. She has never once come to us and asked us to pay a bill because she can't take care of herself. So I'm very happy about that. She got the education she deserved as an American student. We now know that a fundamental piece of Barack Obama's plan to fundamentally change America, which is what he promised us back in 2008, is to get hold of our children. That's what every dictator in history has ever done, and seeing how he behaves, I believe dictator is the more appropriate term to put in front of his name rather than president. He has promised to fundamentally change America. We've reformed our education system multiple times over the last 30, 40, 50 years. It's not going to change with Common Core because the same people who have marginalized our academic content, they have rewritten our history to take out our founding fathers, remove our founding documents, and they've changed the greatest education system in the world to one of social indoctrination. Those are the same people who are responsible for these Common Core standards. You know, Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is do the same thing again and again and hope for a different outcome. Well, what would he say knowing we're letting the same people do the same thing again, and yet we're hoping for a different outcome? I will not see this happen to our children. When my opponent first took office, he was sent to communist China to view and evaluate their education system. You know, I won't, as a candidate, stand up here and promise you that I'm going to raise the graduation rate, or I'm going to ensure you that students' reading is going to go up so many points or whatever. I don't